When we set our endurance record last May, we thought we'd done as well as we could with our Bumblebee, but later I was thinking, are there areas for improvement? Did we use the right fuel? Was the needle valve set as good as it could be? What about the propeller? And could we fly any slower? Energy can be used to do work like turn a propeller. Specific energy measures the energy density, how many joules or BTUs the fuel has per kilogram. How much work can I do with each kilogram of fuel? Each fuel has its own specific energy. Power is the rate at which energy is used, and it keeps the plane flying. The more energy you have in the fuel tanks, the longer you can generate power and fly. Endurance is the reciprocal of power. It measures how long you can use each kilogram of fuel. The endurance event is limited by weight and not by volume, so you want as much energy per kilogram in the fuel as possible. I had incorrectly thought that nitromethane had a higher specific energy than methanol, so last May we used 25% nitro glow fuel. In fact, methanol has twice the energy density as nitromethane. So how is it that a fuel with lower specific energy produces more power? The answer is in the chemical formula. Nitromethane carries an extra oxygen atom, meaning less atmospheric oxygen is required in the cylinder of an engine. This leaves more room for fuel. The nitromethane power stroke is more powerful than methanol, but uses way more fuel and provides less endurance. So the search was on for better fuel. Methane and propane were obvious choices, but they require engine modifications beyond our skill and resources. They also require much heavier tanks. Each ounce of extra weight costs up to 8 minutes of total flight time. If we had a reliable diesel engine that could throttle, that would be a good choice, but we don't. And gasoline engines are not readily available in the small size we need. We decided to test various concentrations of nitromethane in methanol, and Keith suggested we try spiking the fuels with 10% gasoline, so we did that too. We also tested a 50-50 mix of methanol and ethanol, and straight ethanol. We got our test rig and other equipment ready. This included a jug of denatured alcohol, which is really just ethanol made unconsumable. We used the same propeller and RPM for all tests, which is a good proxy for consistent power. It was loud and hot, spending hours under the shade canopy at Centennial Park waiting for 4-ounce fuel tests to finish. We got a good page of results. We discovered the inclusion of any gasoline or ethanol caused the engine to run very inconsistently. It was next to impossible to throttle down. Also, as nitromethane concentration was reduced, endurance went up, but the needle valve became harder to set. When running on FAI 0% nitro fuel, the engine almost quit several times. We discovered during our fuel test just how limited the carburetor is on the OS15 LA engine. As we reduced throttle, the mixture went rich, so we knew we were wasting unburnt fuel last May. Our fuel tests showed that we could exceed 7 minutes of flight per ounce of fuel if we leaned out the mixture as we reduced throttle. We hooked up a peri-needle valve to a servo and connected it to the engine on our test stand. Here is a good video demonstrating the effect. We knew we were on the right track, but the peri-needle valve is designed for a larger engine. It was really sensitive on the OS15 LA. We connected a servo to the OS needle valve, but found we didn't have enough throw. A large gear on the servo provides more turns on the needle valve, but then the servo doesn't have enough power to turn it. In the end, we went with the peri-needle valve and a long control arm to help reduce sensitivity. When we set the record in May, we really hadn't tested any propellers. We just used the master air screw 7/6 that was recommended. We really didn't know which propeller would most efficiently transfer power from the fuel to the airplane, so we set out to test these ones. The summer heat was unbearable, and hours were spent under the canopy at Centennial Park. I foolishly thought that ground testing propellers using the same thrust would be a good comparison, but static thrust is no substitute for measuring in-flight endurance. By the time I realized my error, the summer was almost gone, but we still had some time to flight test a few props. It was during these flight tests that we started to notice a new problem, engine flameout. More about that later. The propeller tests favored the APC 7.7 prop, so that's the one we chose. I noticed during our flight in May that we were keeping up our speed in order to maintain line tension. Maybe with more offset thrust, we could slow down and save fuel. Moving the lead-out guide back increases offset thrust and line tension. It turns out we couldn't spare any thrust for offset because we needed it all for takeoff and flight at full weight. Besides, at the beginning of an endurance flight, the weight of the fuel creates loads of line tension. It's only after the fuel burns off that you want more offset so you can slow down. We just didn't have time to build an in-flight adjustable lead-out guide. You also have to consider the added weight of such devices. Each added ounce of equipment costs you minutes of fuel. 2 days before our September endurance attempt, I stalled the plane onto the grass at full weight. The hasty repairs cost another ounce of weight, and I broke our only 7.7 propeller. We still hadn't solved the problem of intermittent engine flameout. Maybe the problem was engine vibration affecting the overly sensitive peri-needle valve. Another suggestion was that we were using low or zero nitro in our fuel, and the glow plug was getting too cool. I built a shroud for the cylinder to try to keep the engine hot, but it didn't look good enough to use in flight, and we were out of time for testing. We decided to fly with 10% nitromethane in the hopes that the nitro would keep the glow plug lit. We attempted to set a new endurance record on September 18, 2016. Recognizing the possibility of a 4-hour flight, every precaution was taken. Our only 7.7 prop was broken. Even though I had taken off at full weight numerous times with the 7.8 and 7.9 props, the Bumblebee just would not leave the ground that day with either of those props installed.
There it goes. Come on, Bumblebee.
We finally had to put on the 7.6 APC prop to get a successful takeoff. Comparing this attempt with last May, our new fuel choice was a bit better in specific energy, but the real improvement to the endurance record would come from the in-flight adjustable needle valve. During the flight, we kept track of our RPM using a pitch pipe. I would match the pitch of the engine to the pipe, and Daniel would look up the RPM corresponding to that frequency. Alas, after 1.5 hours, the engine flamed out and we were an hour shy of our previous record. The fuel remaining indicated we were tracking about 3.5 hours total flight time. The consolation is that had we not set the previous record, this flight would have been a record flight.
Smile!
We're considering building a new airplane for an attempt next season. Maybe a flying wing with more span would weigh less and carry more fuel. We need to sort out the needle valve sensitivity issue, and we have to keep the engine lit on FAI fuel containing no nitromethane. There is no reward without risk, and we must rise to this challenge. There are endurance minutes out there to be had, and we want them.